What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush episode review. Today, guys, we are going to be going over episode 12 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush. Very excited to be discussing this episode with you guys, so without further ado, let's jump right into it. So, generally speaking, what were my thoughts on episode 12 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush? I thought this was a very solid episode. Going into this episode, there was a lot of high expectations with this episode because obviously we're now at the point of the show where we're seeing our first confrontation between our protagonist and rival, aka Udius and Zweijo. And this has been a duel that I've been very excited to see since very beginning of this show. If you look at any matchup that we could potentially have in this show, this is the number one duel that I've wanted to see in the show, and the fact that we're finally at that point in time so that way we can get this duel between these two characters, I am very excited for it. And I thought for the first part of this duel, because yes, this is going to be a two-part duel, which I'm going to be discussing that a little later on, because I do have some stuff I want to talk about regarding, like the 13 episode arc, because, that's a very big topic that I've been seeing going about ever since we got the confirmation that this is going to be a two-part duel. So I'm going to be discussing that in a little bit, but just looking at the first part overall of this duel, I thought, it was pretty solid. I do think it could have been a little better in my opinion, and I'll explain why as we go throughout the episode review. But I still thought, the first part of this duel, I thought, even with the complaints that I'll talk about in this episode, and it's not really much at all, I thought this episode's first part of the duel was very, very solid. It had some twists that I was not expecting at all, and I'm very excited to be discussing this duel with you guys. But let's start off at the beginning of this episode, where after the last episode we were basically trying to hunt down Zweijo, we finally have been able to confront him once and for all, and now we can basically try to settle this whole situation with Zweijo and try to get the Earthmar off of him before he ends up turning this substance into a weapon. And, Udius is trying to talk him down, saying that, this isn't right, there is a completely different way that we should be handling this, trying to go in here with this Earthmar and basically trying to kill people to end this as quickly as possible is not the right way. And, he's just basically trying to tell him that, this is not right, you need to stop what you're doing. And you even have the countryman, that's cheering him on, that's completely agreeing with Udius. And Zweijo, all he says is silence. And every single countryman, except for Udius, just started quaking in fear. And I will say this was a very great way to start off this episode. It just shows how strong, or at least in terms of a presence standpoint, that Zweijo is. The fact that with one word, he was able to just completely make the 8.88 million countrymen fear beneath them because of how commanding he is. It was so great, and it really showed how strong Yugioh is as a commander, that he just yells silence to them one time and they just all basically just shut up. And even Udius stops talking and he just grins at him, because even though, yeah, he's someone that he doesn't agree with right now, it doesn't mean that he doesn't understand that he's the commander and he is an opposing force. And Zweijo is trying to talk about his perspective on the whole situation, where he believes that we need to end the war right here, right now. This can lead to bigger casualties in the future, which Bochi even goes further into detail with that, stating that, if this whole resolve with the two clusters doesn't get, resolved, then basically what will end up happening is that there's a potential that other clusters will get involved with this war, and you go just from a civil war to basically a universal war where all of these different clusters are fighting against each other. And the reason why it's especially worse is that this might mean that Earth might get involved with this war, which obviously, the Earthlings don't actually have the capabilities that the aliens do. So the fact that they might have to be in basically the war zone of this whole war between, the multiple clusters, like this is not safe for humanity at all. And this is something that they might end up having to deal with if they cannot get this resolved. So I will say this, I understand where Yugioh is coming from. Now, do I necessarily agree with them? No, you are jumping way too quick into this because obviously, this is a problem that's going on, and I understand you want to end this as soon as humanly possible. But using a substance that you have not had for that long and trying to use it to end the war, how the hell do you know that it's going to be successful in ending this war for good? Hell, you might end up starting this universal war if you use this substance to fight against the cluster that has been attacking your hometown, because more than likely the other clusters are going to look at this and say, oh shoot, he has something that can potentially end our own cluster. Let's go after him before, this gets way out of hand and they basically get under attack from, Yugioh and his new substance. Basically, they would want to try to stop him before it gets too bad, so they would try to sneak attack him, and we would just be in the same situation, but potentially even worse, because this could be multiple clusters that look at this situation and think, yeah, we got to deal with them, and that's just going to lead into more casualties. So yeah, I understand why he wants to use this to kind of end the war, but just jumping into it where you haven't had it that long, you haven't, in my opinion, fully tuned the possibility of this, because although it seems like he's been able to control this very well, you don't know if that's going to happen when you go into Velgear, because this could be something that you are underestimating, and it could cause even more casualties than Yugioh might even expect. So, although I understand why he wants to use this, you're jumping into this way too fast. I know you want to end it so the casualties can stop, but you gotta be more strategic about it, because using an unknown substance that you have not had for a while and you have not been able to test enough to be able to really, use it efficiently. And although it seems like he was able to use it completely fine in this, who's to say that it might not work when he goes up to Velgear? And like I said earlier, even if it does work when he goes up there, that doesn't mean you're not going to cause another war because of this. So yeah, we're just in a interesting situation when it comes to Elise. Not saying that Yugioh is perfect. I mean, Yugioh even mentions it in the episode where, although, your ideals seems positive, how the hell are you going to know that's going to work? You're basically just going on the limb that, they can end this peacefully. What if they just say no and they just continue on with the war and they just don't care about what Yugioh thinks? So, yeah, like, I understand both sides, and that's where I will say, though, what I've loved about these two characters is the ideology clashes that they're having with each other, because I do think that there is a fair point between each other's viewpoints. And although I do believe that I'm going to be more on the side with Yugioh, because I feel like just trying to use the substance to kill off the rest of the opposing cluster and just end this as quickly as possible is just way too rash. It doesn't mean that Yugioh is as foolproof either, because he's just going on a whim that, yeah, you can talk about rush rules and it's going to end the war. Like, come on, you got to be a little bit more realistic than that. But just seeing the two ideology clashes with each other has been super fascinating, and I've absolutely loved it. But now let's get into the duel between Yugioh and Yugioh. General thoughts on the first part of this duel. I really did think it was a pretty solid first part to this duel. There was two complaints that I did have with this episode. One was pretty minor, so I don't think it was really that big of a deal, but I want to talk about the part that I was just not really the biggest fan of, and it wasn't even anything to do with the duel. It was more outside of the duel. I believe it was after Yugioh had taken his first turn, and he was basically attacking Yugioh with his monster, because he was able to use the Earth Damar to basically make his monster actually deal physical damage, and making it from a monster that was just solid vision to now a monster that is a real monster. And we basically had a joke where, you had Yuhi trying to produce more Earth Damar to kind of give to Udius, so that way he can actually be able to play on a fair ground when it comes to this. But we ended up getting a fart joke out of the whole situation, which, yeah, haha, it's funny. We had a fart joke, yada, yada, yada. In my opinion, this was just so freaking unnecessary and stupid. Like, really, out of all of the freaking jokes that you could have done in this episode, you had to go with a goddamn fart joke. Like, really? Like, out of all the comedy acts that you have, you're gonna do a fart joke. Yes, I know some people think it's funny, but I don't know, it's just very childish. And yeah, I know the show is targeted towards kids, but come on, grow up. Like, that is not funny at all. You try to, help it with the whole reaction with Neanderstar and especially Yumu, because Yumu was just standing right behind him. So you basically were trying to get some comedic moment out of it, but I was just watching the episode and they did the fart joke and I was just like, are you kidding me, dude? Like, move the hell on. We do not need to be seeing this. Like, we've had this intense time in the episode because of the whole situation that's going on, and you stop to do a fart joke. Like, really? You couldn't have thought of any better comedic joke right now, and that's what you came up with. That is your A material right there. Like, I don't know, like, I felt like they could have done that a lot better. We did not need a fart joke in this episode, but that was probably my biggest complaint with the episode, is just stopping the duel for that. There was no need for that. And then, I guess the other thing I will discuss, and this isn't really that big in my opinion, but I was a little disappointed on it, and that's the fact that I felt like we didn't really have a good balance in this episode when it came to dialogue and dueling. I don't know, to me, I just felt like there was way too much dialogue in this episode. Like, don't get me wrong, dialogue is important, and I felt like, they were able to use the dialogue really well in this episode, but we needed a little bit more dueling. Like, we only got 2 full turns and 1 turn that saw Yugioh summon his second ace monster, which, don't get me wrong, was a great moment, but I felt like you could have had a lot more dueling in this episode. I just felt like we were just talking a little too much, especially since one of that dialogue was the fart joke I mentioned earlier. So yeah, maybe you could have backed off the dialogue just a little bit so that way we could do a little bit more dueling, but it wasn't really that big of a deal anyways, because like I said, I think dialogue is very important, and we still got that, and I thought the dialogue for the most part was enjoyable, so it wasn't too big of a deal. But yeah, kind of going into this next episode, I do hope that we do focus a little bit more on the dueling than the dialogue. I thought we got quite a bit of dialogue in this episode, and not saying we don't need any dialogue in the next episode, just I want to see a little bit more of this duel. I want to see these two go at it a little bit more. So yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest things with the episode that they could have done a little bit better, in my opinion. Again, I want to state this, that, I do think the dialogue is important. Of course, I do think it's important, but I do think the dueling is another key factor as well, because we've been wanting to see these two go at it for a while now, and I just want to see them go at it. Like, yeah, again, dialogue is important, but going into the next episode, still have your dialogue, and so that way we can learn a little bit more for plot's sake. But you need to let these two go at it next episode. Like, have the majority of next episode be dueling, which I do believe they're going to do that. I think they're going to save the next episode for more of the dueling of this confrontation. So, yeah, very excited for that. Again, not really too big of a complaint. It's just something I kind of wish they did a little bit better, but, it wasn't really that big of a deal, especially when you look at the last 5 minutes of this episode. But before I even discuss that, I real quickly want to talk about, the whole thing with the Earth Damar and how it works. I thought that was pretty interesting, where we basically learned that the way that you're able to use the Earth Damar is by basically taking any ordinary dual disc and shoving it into this container of Earth Damar, and you basically let it soak in the Earth Damar, because apparently this stuff is a liquid, which I guess to be fair, we already knew that it was a liquid, but, being able to soak this in here, and that's how you basically get the power. And the longer you have the dual disc in the the Earthamar, the stronger the Earthamar is going to be, was very interesting to say the least. And we basically got to see, the differences between when Chupataro used the Earthamar from his duel against Udius back in episode 10. And seeing how Yugioh, who has soaked the Duelist longer in the Earthamar, and basically seeing how much more of the Earthamar that he can use in this episode was pretty fascinating to say the least, where Chupataro only had, I believe it was like 30 minutes in the Earthamar, where Yugioh had 33 hours. That's right, hours in the Earthamar, which I gotta say, Bridge, pretty disappointed. I felt like this would have been a great opportunity to do an 888 joke, I feel like that's kind of the equivalent of the 777 and 666 thing that happened back in Sevens, and you're going to basically have that with the 888 in this show. But come on, Bridge, you love doing that. How the hell did you miss that in this episode? But, that wasn't really that big of a deal either. And just the fact that we got to see more of the strength of the Earthamar was very interesting, to say the least. I mean, hell, it got so bad to the point where during the duel, Yuhi actually passes out because he can no longer take the Earthamar, to the point where he got him sick to where he passed out. Like, that's how insane this Earthamar has now become, to where Yuhi, who can feel this Earthamar, is now even passing out from the Earthamar because of how powerful it was. Like, that to me was a great shot as well, and made me do feel bad for Yuhi a little bit, and the fact that he has to deal with all of this pain from the Earthamar. Like, you gotta have to kind of feel bad for the kid. But we gotta talk about the last 5 minutes of this episode and the whole 13 episode arc thing with this show. We got to start off with, Yugioh and his final turn. His final turn consists basically of him summoning his ace monster, Voidger Requiem, which I just got to say this, it's easily my favorite ace monster of the show. I absolutely love the design of his ace monster. It looked so freaking sick with that, like, axe-looking thing that he was holding. Like, that was so freaking sick to see his ace monster in this episode, which, that was cool enough. But I think what really sold it to me as well is after he summons his ace monster, he jumps on top of the ace monster after telling Mitsuzuku to go somewhere, which was very strange at first, but we learn the reason why, because after that little, like, brief exchange, even though it wasn't an exchange, it was just, Yugioh looking at her and telling her to go, basically, and, she goes off, she goes to where this big container of the Earthamar is, and we get to see Mitsuzuku's, actual design for the first time, which I really do like her design. Something I've seen a lot of people pointing out that I thought was very interesting is the eye, like, shape on her actual eye. Like, I think it was like a V or something like that. I can't remember the exact design of it. It was the same design of the eyes that Udius and Yugioh has. So, is this another resident from Velgear? Like, that's something that is very interesting and actually would make a whole lot of sense because, Mitsuzuku has such a close relationship with Yugioh, or at least in the case of, being the only one that is still following him. Like, yeah, obviously, Chupataro is out right now, and Kawaii Tail just does not give a damn, let's be honest. But to just see how much she cares and respects Yugioh was very interesting, and I think maybe it's because, obviously he is the commander back in Velgear, and maybe she was someone that was part of the army or something like that, and, she has a lot of respect for Yugioh. Like, it's a very interesting situation with Mitsuzuku, and I'm very fascinated to learn a little bit more about her, but I will say this, really did like her design. She's probably my favorite girl design character besides the other one we're going to be discussing in this episode, because I thought she had such a great design. But going back to Yugioh and his ace monster, so after telling Mitsuzuku to go to this lab area, he basically places his hand on the monster. Mitsuzuku flips the switch, and Yugioh starts using the Earthamar on his monster, and instead of just making the monster, just solid like he's done the last couple of times, and even Yuhi mentions that, oh, this is pretty predictable, you're just going to do the same thing, but he does not do the same thing. Because not only is he making this monster a physical monster, which has been a thing that we've been seeing the Earthamar do since Chupataro did it, but apparently now, and I don't know if this is because of the fact that he was able to soak his dual disc longer than Earthamar, more than likely that's probably how he was able to do this, but not only was he able to make the monster physical, but he was able to fuse with his own monster, which was a concept that I was not expecting at all going into this episode. And the fact that we ended up seeing Yugioh fuse with his own damn monster, like, holy crap, was that super, super cool. This has been a concept that we've seen before, of course. The last time we saw this was with Zark, and then you had some other memorable characters like Darts and especially Merrick fusing with their monsters, and now seeing Yugioh doing it in this show, like, I am really excited to see the rest of this duel. I mean, I'm still in shock the fact that they actually went down that route of him fusing with his own monster, so absolutely love that. But if there's anything that was going to top that off, it was the Asana variant that we saw in this episode. So during the duel, Kawaii Tell just disappears. He walks off and, to do his own thing after witnessing some of the duel. And, he ends up leaving the area and ends up visiting Asaka, I believe, was the name of the character, which is basically the Asana variant of the show. She's sitting at her office and she basically says, "State your business, Kappa, like, what are you doing here?" And that's basically all we saw, and I think that was actually the final shot of the episode. So the fact that we're seeing our Asana variant, really cool to see that. Was I surprised about it? For the sense of seeing it in this episode, yes, but am I surprised that we are seeing an Asana variant? Not at all. I mean, this town was called Matsuba Town, for crying out loud. We were going to see a Matsuba counterpart at some point, and it seems like this is a play off of Asana and Tiger's name, or Tiger's actual name, which I don't know her actual name, so I do apologize for it. I'm just so used to calling her Tiger that I just don't remember it, but it seems like it's a play off of that, even though to me it just looks like they just took the N and replaced it with a K. Asana, Asaka, makes a whole lot of sense. So yeah, not really too surprised that we actually saw this variant. Was surprised that we saw it in this episode, don't get me wrong, but seeing the variant in general, not really too surprised. And you guys know my thoughts on this whole variant thing if you watch, believe it was my episode 9 review. I don't mind them doing it. I just think we're getting to the point where we're seeing too many variants in this show. And I know people don't really necessarily have a problem with that. I know it's very exciting. I just think we've seen a little bit of it, a little too much, and I just feel like they kind of need to slow down with the variants, which, to be fair, I don't think they're going to really do too many variants. I think the only ones that we need to expect is Kamijo and Saionji, I think, are the only two ones that we're going to see going into the rest of the show. I think those are the last two variants that we're going to get in the show, or at least I'm hoping that's the last two variants in this show, because again, we do not need all of these different variants. I want to see more unique concepts to this show, not from 7. So that's the one thing I will say, though. As much as I thought this reveal was surprising and I thought it was a great moment, we need to calm down on the variants. We just have so many variants in this show, and I think they need to slow down on it a little bit. But with that being said, that's pretty much it for the episode. Not a whole lot more else that we can really discuss. I do real quickly want to briefly mention the aspect of the 13 episode arcs returning in the show. Obviously, this is going to be a 2-part duel, with the duel concluding in episode 13, and I think that more than likely confirms that. I'm not going to talk about it too much because, again, it's not really confirmed yet. They might just decide to do a 2-part duel here and might do it again for the next encounter, but just because they've had that prospect before, we're just gonna real quickly discuss the potential of them doing that. Obviously, I'm not really the biggest fan of the idea of them doing that. I was not a big fan of the 13 episode arcs at all in the last show, and the aspect of them doing it again for this show, just not really too excited for it, and I do hope that they don't do it. More than likely, they are going to do it, which I won't be the biggest fan of, but I'll kind of discuss that more when we go into episode 13 for my episode 13 reveal. I'll probably dive deeper into it, but the whole aspect in general, not really that excited for it. But yeah, with that being said, that is going to be it for this episode review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your guys' thoughts on episode 12 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush. Did you like the episode? Did you think the episode was alright? Or were you guys not the biggest fan of this episode? Let me know your guys' thoughts on the Yugioh fusion with his monster aspect of the episode and just learning on how the Earthamar actually works and the whole soaking process. Let me know your guys' thoughts on the Asana variant that we saw in this episode in the form of Asaka. And overall, let me know your guys' thoughts on the episode. And let me know, do you guys think we're going to be seeing a 13 episode arc in this show, or do you think they're going to actually go longer and do longer than 13 episodes for an arc? Would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this down below. But with that being said, that is going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, guys, take care and have yourselves a great rest of your day.